Good afternoon and welcome to today's post-cabinet media conference. Today I am joined by the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Prime Minister, who will address you all on the issues arising from the property tax, and the Minister of Work and Transport, the Honorable Rohan Sinan, will address matters concerning the air bridge. Before they do so, I just wanted to apprise members of the media of certain developments in relation to ICT and roaming charges that have arisen given the issue that has been raised concerning the Minister for Tourism. Now, the roaming charges are dictated by telecom communication companies across the region, and interestingly, the CARICOM ministers dealing with ICT are scheduled to meet tomorrow. It's a virtual meeting where we will be discussing the single electronics ICT space that deals with several issues, including roaming charges. Now, unfortunately, the Bahamas, that is the country at the center of the controversy, is not a signatory to the CSME that deals with the economic partnership among the CARICOM countries, so that the Bahamas is not a party, will not be a party to the single electronics space for all Caribbean countries that will dictate roaming charges, the assignment of numbers, legal things that deal with ICT, and because of that, the roaming rates in the Bahamas are approximately 9 to 10 percent more than what occurs in other Caribbean countries. So if you are 9 times more than occurs in other Caribbean countries, so traveling to the Bahamas and using ICT is considerably more expensive than what occurs in any other Caribbean territory. But the CARICOM heads of government met in February this year and agreed to a roadmap to harmonize all the ICT regulations, rates, roaming charges for the Caribbean countries apart from the Bahamas. And when we meet tomorrow, we are going to develop an integrated plan to ensure that this takes place in a given time frame, so that within a short period of time, you will be able to have number portability across the region. You'll be able to make calls in Trinidad at the same rate as you would in another Caribbean country, and all of that will be governed by the framework that that CARICOM is working on. Um, the meeting tomorrow is being held. Each minister will be participating from their individual territory using the ICT networks, so that it's a virtual meeting. We've had several meetings like that before. This is an ongoing initiative to ensure that roaming charges and ICT expenditure is kept to a minimum. And given the CARICOM, once CARICOM agreed in February this year, based on our meeting today, by July, there's supposed to be another heads of government meeting where we expect to make significant advances in terms of the use of roaming and ICT telephones across the region. So that's my contribution. I can take questions after, but I now hand you over to the Minister of Works and Transport. Thank you.
Good afternoon to members, all of the media. I'm just here to give a report on basically the seabridge. As we all are aware, we have been experiencing some challenges with the seabridge since the cargo vessel would have left our shores. To give an update on actually what is happening now, you recall that the cabinet had given the permission for the port to go out in the short term to have a replacement vessel in the medium term for the procurement of a 3-year charter hire, and then the long term, the purchase of a vessel. A month has passed. The port has been looking at some of the options available. They have tailored it down to about 2 options for the cargo vessel, again for the short term, because we clearly recognize that there are some challenges with the 2 vessels that we are using right now, and I expect that very soon the port will have a vessel that will replace for the short term the 2 vessels that are being used on the seabridge at this time. We also have some serious challenges with the passenger vessels. These 2 vessels, one is about 22 years old, one is about 16 years old. They are both due for dry docking, and that had been programmed for June of this year and September of this year. However, we have been experiencing a lot of delays due to mechanical problems. What the board have put forward to the ministry is the charter of another passenger vessel to come to Trinidad, so that this will take up the slack once we send the vessel to dry dock. So we will always have 2 vessels operating. This charter will be for a 6-month period, and we expect it to have the both vessels go through a proper dry docking, so that when they come back out, at least we should not have this problem going forward. There is some challenges, but the board at the port are definitely considering all the options, and we expect to have some relief very soon. As we speak today, both vessels supposed to be operating. We had a 2 days ago where there were no vessels operating, at least for 1 day. So we are getting back to the normal sailing. However, because of the length of time these vessels have not gone on proper dry docking, there are some challenges that are coming up. Okay, and as the Minister of Communication, I would take whatever questions after.
We'll have the Honorable Prime Minister, and then we'll make a short statement, and then we'll hear from you all.
Thank you. I just want to report that the Commissioner of Valuations will be asked to extend the time for submission of returns for properties to the 5th of June, 2017.
That's it?
But that's the statement. I'm ready to answer questions now.
Why the decision to extend the time, and what changed from the statements in the Parliament and as recently as Monday?
Well, you know, people, Trinidadians, may be within a special group within this group of people, don't like to pay tax. So that this is very unusual to see people lining up to go through the process of paying tax. I mean, this is not, I have not seen this before. I've not seen people lining up, you know, in the hot sun, long lines, in order to subject themselves to the payment of tax. So there's been an overwhelming response to the request from the Commissioner of Valuations for property owners to submit information on their properties. And as, you know, Trinidadians and Tobagonians again are famous for last minute. So what has happened is that in the last week leading up to the 22nd is Monday, the number of persons visiting the valuations offices has exploded. I was told that up to last week there were about 60,000 forms had been submitted. The estimates are for this week, over 90,000 additional forms may have been submitted already. So we've gone from 50,000 to 60,000 to 150,000 just in a couple of days. So because of this response, and it is obvious that people want to get involved with this process of having their properties valued and assessed, and they want to pay the tax. So that we think that in the circumstances, we didn't want to have more and more confusion. We felt it was necessary to give people the opportunity to submit their returns and get involved in the process.
The number of people they say is 150.
That's just an estimate.
Total number of homes in the country is about what, 400,000?
400,000, yes.
If you take the number of days multiplied, divided, do we have enough time for the other 250,000 to file and finish on June the 5th?
Well,
or is it kind of not predicting and giving the right time, so at least we have the 250 with enough time to file?
Mr. Amar, I'm a little lost. Could you summarize your question?
There are 15 days, and you have 250,000 people. If you take 15 into 250, is it practical?
Well, from the information that I have received, from Monday to Wednesday of this week, they're running at about 20 to 30,000 per day. That's the information I have received, but this is what has been told to me. I'll get the exact numbers by tomorrow.
If those numbers do equate, would you then make a proper adjustment so that we don't have to come back twice?
No, this is the extension that we are going to ask the Commission of Valuations to make at this time.
In view of the fear in people's minds that they're going to lose their property if things do happen, I think you had said that people over 65, old age pensioners, don't have to pay property tax. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Amar, you've made two statements there. That there's fear in people's minds that they would lose their property. Let me just correct that. Under the Property Tax Act, there is a long and drawn-out process for persons to firstly appeal the assessment and then go through a series of processes. And the period is actually a 5-year period before the state can initiate action to levy on the property. So that this notion that the state will be coming to grab your property, that's not going to happen. So with respect to persons over the age of 65, there is a provision in the Act that persons who are financially challenged can make an application on the grounds of hardship to have the tax deferred, and we will seriously consider those applications. Okay?
Does the extension have anything, is the extension only related to the matters that you referred to, or was there any consideration about the pre-action protocol letters that have been implemented? Did that factor into the decision at all?
In no way whatsoever. This has nothing to do with that. All of us have been reading the papers, seeing what's going on, watching television. You see the long, long lines. It's intensified. And it is because of the response that we got from persons, contrary to the attempts by the opposition to tell people, don't file, tear up the form, etc., etc., etc. What we're seeing is the reverse. We're seeing that people want to get involved in the process and have their properties valued and pay the tax.
Once we have this extension, you're confident that that the tax can be implemented within the time frame that you're articulated?
Well, firstly, let me clarify. This is an information gathering phase. So what the Commission of Valuations is doing is asking property owners to submit information on their properties, address, how many rooms, who the owner is, and if they can, an estimate of the rental value, and any other documentation that would help to identify and validate the ownership of the property and the location and so on. So this is a long way away from the actual payment of the tax. This is required to do something called populating the valuation rolls. The valuation rolls are simply the lists of all the properties in Trinidad and Tobago, the owners, the value, and so on. So at present, the Commission of Valuations, the Valuation Division, is in the process of gathering the necessary information in order to populate the valuation rolls, which would have a unique assessment associated with each property. Having done that, the Commission of Valuations will then send a notice to property owners telling them, we have assessed the annual rental value on your property as being X dollars, and the property tax that you have to pay is Y dollars. And then the process kicks in where if you're not satisfied, you can challenge it and that sort of thing. So we're not yet at the stage where notices have gone out from the Commission of Valuations telling people what the assessed tax is on their property. Okay?
Being given to increasing the number of centers
Yes.
at which people...
Yes, yes. We had a meeting in the Ministry of Finance yesterday, and the proposal is that they start to use buildings within the communities and send additional staff out to the communities to assist people to submit the forms. Yes.
The form that was submitted through your office differs from the form that forms part of the bill. When you look at the bill that is published and passed in 2009, that form is different. It doesn't reflect some of the information you are asking. Does the bill get changed without parliamentary approval? Can it be done? Can you just change the form, which was the part of the bill that was approved by the parliament when the parliament approved the law? Can you just change the form now and send out another form?
Mr. Ahmad, again, I'll have to correct you. The commissioner is exercising a power under a particular section of the Act to request information from property owners.
So the form was ill-conceived when it came out at the beginning when the parliament reviewed it. They didn't know that they needed all this information.
Again, I will have to correct you. Within the law, not only do you have the schedule, which is that particular form, there's also a power given to the commissioner to request information from property owners, separate and apart from the form in the schedule.
The points Mr. Amar is raising relates to the, well, it's contained in the pre-action letter that was sent.
Do you want me to discuss a pre-action letter? Because I will not. No, I would not discuss, no, seriously, Mr. Nanta. Sorry, Kamal, I apologize. No, just hold on, please, if you don't mind. We have received the pre-action letters, and we are in the process of responding to them. I believe the deadline for one of them is tomorrow. There are a number of points, and I don't think we should discuss here what the ministry's response will be to the pre-action letters, because I am certain as soon as the opposition MPs receive the response from the government's lawyers, it will be published. So you will see the response there. But I don't think this is the forum to discuss something that may be the subject of litigation.
You expect to collect property tax for the current fiscal year by September 30th, 2017.
Yes.
Minister, just to
And,
make
and that is based on what kind of timeline? In other words, June 5th, people would have submitted their forms. How long is the process of going through all of those forms take? And then you need to send out the assessments. How long does that take, and so on?
We should be able to do it by September 30th.
So that I have it clear, the $500 fine that was referred to is in relation to neglecting to submit the information, correct?
That is part of the pre-action letter.
What about...
So therefore, I can't respond to your question.
Second question.
You will see our response when our letter is published by the other side. Okay.
What about, I've heard that there are persons in Tobago whose properties, they don't have deeds for it, like they were handed down from generation to generation. What is the process for those persons who don't know, don't have a deed for their property or don't have any of those information that the form is asking for?
When you look at the definition of owner in the legislation, it speaks to owner or occupier. Okay?
What is the process for them to gather that information?
Well, either you are occupying property or you're not occupying the property. If you are not the owner and the owner is not recorded anywhere, you're just occupying it, then you submit the form as an occupier of the property. Okay?
Why did the government, the current administration, decide to go after residential properties before industrial and commercial? Unlike Mr. Hawaii in 2014, who put industrial and commercial before residential?
I'm not aware Mr. Hawaii did anything. What I am aware of is that in a budget presentation, he spoke about starting the process of valuing properties, starting with industrial and so on. But I'm not aware that he followed through with that. In fact, if I listened to the peacock in the parliament, when we read out Mr. Hawaii's speech, Mr. Moonilal said, that was before we talked to him and we tell him to stop that. So my understanding is that the government, the People's Partnership government, authorized the Minister of Finance at the time, Mr. Hawaii, to make a budget speech in which he said we will be implementing the property tax immediately, starting with industrial and commercial and so on. And then members of that cabinet took hold of Mr. Hawaii and told him stop that. And the result of that was a amendment bill that came to the parliament to waive the payment of property tax up to December 2015. So I'm not aware, after he said that, whether he did anything. I'll tell you why we are starting with residential. I'm told there are in excess of 250,000, more or less, properties that are recorded, residential properties. So the records with respect to residential properties are in much better shape than the records with respect to industrial and commercial. That's what I'm advised by the Valuations Division. So it is much easier to do an assessment of the annual rental value of a residential property and also to do an assessment and to send out a notice to a taxpayer with respect to the tax that they should pay because of the condition of the assessment rolls and the records with respect to residential properties. Many industrial and commercial properties, with the exception of commercial properties in the cities, in Port of Spain and San Fernando and so on, are not on the books. They're not recorded. So that the process of determining the physical characteristics of an industrial property or a commercial property and assessing its value and determining what the property tax should be on those commercial and industrial properties is going to take a little bit longer than the assessment for residential properties, because with residential properties, I can use myself as an example. I have an assessment number for my property because when I built it, I went to the warden's office. It was recorded. Someone actually visited it from the valuation division at the time. That was 25 years ago. And I got an assessment number and I began to pay land and building taxes. So that there are many persons such as myself, I'm told over 200,000 properties are already in the system. So it's very easy to simply update the records with respect to these properties and start rolling out the collection of tax with respect to residential properties. With respect to commercial and industrial properties, many of these will require field visits. You may have heard me say that we expect that in 75% of the cases, no field visit will be required. That's because there's already fairly accurate information in the system, but that applies to residential properties. Commercial and industrial, we're going to have to take our time with it because a lot of these are new properties or properties that are simply not in the system at all. There's no information at all. So that it would take longer because the ministry, of course, wants to be accurate as possible. We want to avoid as many challenges as possible, and that's why we're starting with residential. It's more practical, it's more efficient.
Commercial and industrial properties to submit the same or similar forms that the residential property owners hold?
Yes, the Commission of Valuations will do so. My understanding is that notices went out from the Commission of Valuations simply to residential properties. That's my understanding. I've asked them this morning to just verify that information for me. But the 400,000 notices that were delivered are based on an assessment of 400,000 dwellings in Trinidad and Tobago. And I can also tell you what the Evaluation Division told me this morning, that they've started the outreach program with owners of industrial and commercial properties. For example, they tell me they're meeting with the Point Lisas group of property owners tomorrow to start to interface with that particular sector to explain to them the ramifications, the interpretation of the act, how the tax is to be collected, and so on. So the process will start with residential because it's more efficient to do that because the records are already there, and then it will move on to commercial and industrial and so on.
In the approved budget for 2017, 16-17, I have been trying to get some feedback. There are two things that is recorded. One thing that is called a margin call and swap agreement.
No, hold a second, please. Could I just stay with property tax questions from the rest of the media? Thank you.
Can I ask you how much, if the Ministry of Finance has an estimate of the amount of property tax expects to collect from commercial and residential properties, as opposed to the 506 million it expects to get from residential property?
I wouldn't want to give a breakdown now, but I will tell you something, that the rate of tax on commercial and industrial is more than the rate on residential. But there may not be as many commercial and industrial properties as there are residential. So it's, there's a trade-off. So I wouldn't want to give precise numbers, but certainly I will get that information so at a subsequent time I can answer that question with some sort of confidence.
Estimated time frame according to source out the commercial and industrial property tax?
Well, we are continuing with this process. We're going to just keep going until we finish. We have hired people in the valuations division, or we're in the process of completing the hiring for a period of 2 years. And we're just going to keep going because there are a lot of properties that are just not there. So that obviously a process of a field inspection and assessment is going to take far longer than just looking up in the books and looking and matching an assessment number of an existing residential property. That could be done in a couple of minutes. But the question of assessing an industrial plant and machinery, for example, is going to take some time. So we are bringing on these 250 people for a period of 2 years for this process.
Information continues to be given to people. I know of someone who has a vacant property, and when they went to submit the form, they were told by people in the division that there was no requirement if the property was vacant, residential.
I'm surprised because I saw the 3 people from the valuations division that we have making the rounds of the media. I saw them myself on television being asked that question, and they answered. They not only explained that yes, that property has to be, the information on that kind of vacant piece of land has to be submitted. They even went through a sample calculation to show how you work out the rental value. And I'll say that now for the benefit of persons who may have vacant land. That process begins with an assessment of the capital value or the market price of the property. So let's use a parcel of residential land, for example, with a market value of $1 million. Okay? You work out the annual rental value of that property by multiplying the market price by 3.5%. So you get that the annual rental value of a vacant piece of residential land that is worth $1 million will be $35,000. 3.5% of $1 million. But that is not the tax. The tax is then 3% of that $35,000, which is $1,050 per year. So that the tax on a vacant parcel of residential land worth $1 million is $1,050 per year. So there is a requirement to submit particulars with respect to vacant land. Okay?
Just another category, people who are overseas and have property in Trinidad and who may not have had the forms. Do they have, is there the onus on them to access the forms and get them to...
They can appoint somebody to submit it on their behalf. That's what I would advise people who are overseas, because that's a question that's been posed to me before. If you're not here, I would advise you to get somebody, a family member or some associate or friend, submit the form on your behalf. Okay?
Is you said 75% of homes may not be visited.
That's the estimate the Valuation Division has given me, that they expect that they will only visit 25% of properties.
It being equitable. In that, for example, if someone who is a part of that 75% seriously undervalues the annual rental value of their property, right? And they're not visited by someone, but someone who, let's say, puts an accurate figure, is visited by one, they will pay the right thing, but someone else may get away paying a much lower tax.
Right. Let me explain my understanding of how the Valuation Division arrived at that estimate of 75%. Those will be properties on which they already have information. So they will have knowledge of the type of property, the size of the property, the age of the property, the condition of the property, and the value of the property. So it is in those cases, even if someone attempts to undervalue the property, the valuation division has WASA records, TNTEC records, aerial photographs, lands and surveys, etc., neighbors, as Mr. Coffey has just told me. So, it's not going to be easy for people to get away with seriously undervaluing their property. Okay?
Is there a sense in which landlords in Trinidad and Tobago have been getting away with murder in the last how many other years?
I don't understand the question.
I suspect most of the landlords in this country do not declare the rents they receive or the leaseholds they receive.
I have no idea. So that's why I don't understand the question.
Can I suggest to you that many landlords do not declare the income they receive?
Okay,
And
assuming but not accepting what you are saying as being correct. What's the question?
Is this a way of the government getting some of the money that landlords have not been paying tax on, assuming but not accepting, of targeting that?
Not at
that
all.
money?
What this does is identifies properties for the payment of property tax. If in that system, a owner of a property who has been renting the property appears, and when you check the records at the Inland Revenue Department, you recognize that the person owns property and is renting it, but is not declaring any income, that's a matter for the Board of Inland Revenue. That's not a matter for the government. Okay? But I can't agree or disagree with anything you say. I don't want to get into that discussion. Okay?
On a slightly
By the way,
separate-
Mr. Amar is waiting patiently.
On a slightly separate issue.
Yes.
Is there a limit?
Wait a minute.
Yes.
Off property tax?
Off property.
All right, so that's it for property tax? Well,
On property tax, mind you.
you are on property tax?
Yes, I'm on property tax.
Oh, you are on property tax, okay.
In an effort to speed up the process, because we have, as you mentioned, about 250,000 persons to submit. Just like you can download a form, is it possible, was there any provisions you can upload a completed form?
What I would think is that when you get to the tax part, that can be done. Because the Board of Inland Revenue already has an e-tax system where you can apply to be registered to file your returns online. You have to go through a process of identification at one of the TT Connect offices, but you apply online, you get a number, a document, you take that to the TT Connect offices, and you carry your 2 forms of ID, your passport, your driver's permit, whatever, and then you get a registration number, and then you can file your income tax returns online. So that when it comes to property tax, I am certain the e-tax system will kick in, where you will be able to pay the tax online. The point of where you can actually file your valuation return online, that's a very desirable outcome, and I would like to get there sooner rather than later, so that eventually, maybe for next year, people would be able to file the returns online rather than having to do it in person. Okay?
I was looking at an ad in the paper, so I saw that in some cases people are going to be paying 1,000 something, 2,000 something, 3,000 in property tax. However,
Per year,
per year, right, based on the annual rental value.
yeah.
However, there's a concern among a lot of citizens that perhaps landlords are going to raise their rents to exorbitant amounts. And given the fact that we're in an economic crisis at the moment, has the government considered that this may cause a bit of instability or panic among the population? And is there anything in place to cope with that or deal with that?
But I don't think it will cause panic. I think, in fact, some people may now reduce their rents because now it will become known. The point Mr. Wilson was making, that there may be landlords charging rent right now and not declaring the income. If they now have to declare the income, they may be a little more judicious in terms of the quantum of the rent, and it may go down because the more they declare, the more tax they have to pay. So the point I'm making is that is an unknown at this point in time. I would not rush to think that landlords are going to increase the rent. My instinct would be that some of them may actually reduce the rent because they don't want to pay tax on it. Okay, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Few questions about the
Well, I would really like to. I asked Mr. Amar, and he very politely agreed. So over to you, Mr. Amar.
In your media review this budget, you indicated two payments that had to be made, one for Howie and the next one for Harris. Would you say that that was an oversight on the public servant and not included in the budgetary documents for 2017, seeing that it was an outstanding payment that was due and payable?
Not at all. When you do an appropriation to a ministry, there's always an opportunity for that ministry to get savings in some other item. So let's say national security has a appropriation of $3 billion. I'm just throwing out a number, okay? That $3 billion would cover all sorts of things: wages and salaries, goods and services, capital development projects, and so on. Every ministry, every year, would do transfers and environments from one head to another as they discover savings or they're able to achieve savings in a particular vote. So when we did the appropriation for the Ministry of National Security in October of last year, we were hopeful that they would be able to achieve savings in one head or another in order to make these payments. As you come to the mid-year review, you get a much better understanding of whether ministries are achieving savings or not. And having done the analysis, we came to the conclusion that we would have to provide additional funds to the Ministry of National Security. Now that occurs in every single ministry, because projects may start later than projected, or things may cost less than you anticipated, and that's how you achieve savings. On the other hand, some unplanned expenditure may occur mid-year. New projects may come on stream where there's no allocation for it. So that in the mid-year, that's the job that you do. You reallocate based on actual experience.
I understand that completely, and I
Right.
accept it. What
Yes.
I'm concerned about is that this is a referred bill that was inherited. Significant money. And I am of the view that the custodial, the permanent secretary, has a responsibility to know that. That must have been an expense that he would have had to put in the budgetary expenses for the present year. But it seems as if though there was an elimination or error, or they forgot, causing you,
Is this a question?
yes, to have to move the funds, because if it wasn't allocated
Mr.
for,
Amar, what is the question?
why was that not allocated for, seeing that it was an inherited expenditure?
Because there was an expectation that the ministry could achieve savings in another vote where they could transfer the funds.
Final question, David. Bilateral agreement dated 1st June 1989. It's in the book. I can let you have it. I can let you see it. It says net settlement and swap transactions.
That's under the NAR?
I don't know who it was under, but you're in charge now.
1989. No,
And this was passed by you.
No, I'm just trying to get the
Regurgitate.
date. 1989? Right, NAR, yes.
So 89 to now,
Mhm.
it seems that there has been an error in consecutive leaderships to review this matter.
What matter is
Because
that?
$19,083,000 is to be paid out in some net settlement on swap transaction. And there is another one, margin call and swap agreements, $501 million in 2015, $900 million in 2016, and $800 million projected for 2017.
So what's the question?
What is this?
You ask me what that is? Mr.
I
Amar?
don't know.
I'm not that good.
I'm not even Minister of Finance.
I'm not that good. How many pages does that document have?
But they only have one page with this information.
I see. So my memory,
Tear it out and give it to you.
my memory of that document, it has about 500 pages
But this is the
and
important-
about 20 lines on each page.
Yeah, but this one-
That would be 10,000 items. Are not that good. But I could tell you something about, I can tell you something about margin calls and swaps. The former administration, the former People's Partnership government in 2012 entered into an interest rate swap and a currency swap with a local bank, well, a commercial bank. And they hedged against future interest rates in the United States and the value of the yen, the Japanese yen. And they hedged badly. And they locked the government of Trinidad and Tobago into a hedge on interest rates and currency rates, which has caused us to spend a lot of taxpayers' money in margin calls. Okay?
Minister, just for the records, this exists for 10 years. Under the P&M, margin swap on call options form part of this document from my research. This is not a...
Is that a question, Mr. Amar?
No, it's a question I'm asking you because you make it seem as if though it is the People's Partnership that caused this when this is an inherent line.
Is that a question, Mr. Amar?
Is it an inherent line in the budget for the last 10 years?
Mr. Amar, there are 10,000 line items. I am not sure which one you are waving at me. But I can tell you that the last government took out margin calls and swap agreements that has cost this country hundreds of millions of dollars in wasted taxpayers' dollars. With respect, they locked us into binding agreements with a bank for margin calls on interest and currency swaps and hedges. And it has cost this country hundreds of millions of dollars. And since you brought it up, I will be making a statement to Parliament shortly, giving full particulars. With respect to that item, of the 10,000, I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Yes, Mr. Georges.
On a slightly separate topic, I know Minister Coffey spoke about the issue related to the roaming charges, but in relation to government ministers and their telephone allowances, is there a particular limit, right, prescribed per month for a minister, and is there any provision for when that is exceeded, who approves it and so on? Can you explain?
I don't think that's a question any of us could answer at this point in time, but it's certainly something we will look into very seriously.
Well, you could have the communication when you're traveling, you hit the limit, and you're disconnected while you're in a foreign country. I don't think you'd want that to happen to a government minister.
Come back, what if you would bear some of the cost of the if it...
No,
if there's a
hold on. As I said, I don't think that's a question any of us could answer. But if you're on official business, and if the roaming charges relate to official business, why should the official have to cover part of the cost of official business?
Official business.
I think in this case there's a particular concern about the amount per day for data charges, and when you kind of calculate it into data, it seems to be a lot. When you equate, for example, what was used on one day in terms of how much video you could stream, that's like 4 hours or something.
Really?
It seems to
I'm
be
sorry, I'm not competent in terms of the number of megabytes required for streaming video. I looked at it and I saw a total of 700 megabytes over a 4-day period, and I know that a person can use up 1 gigabyte in 1 day. So I am not an expert in these matters, but I'm not competent to answer your question and your preposition and your supposition that this was 4 hours of streaming video. I am not certain that you are correct, and I don't think I want to venture down that road because I don't think I'm an expert, neither are you.
And how would you know what is official from what is personal?
That is a matter for the ministry, the permanent secretary, and the auditor general to determine.
A country, for example, that knowingly has high roaming rates. I mean, isn't it part of your duty as well to maybe be a little judicious, especially in these times?
I don't think anyone knew. The average person would not know the roaming rates in the Bahamas, and that it is so far removed from what it obtains in Jamaica, Barbados, and any other CARICOM country.
But tell me something, what happens if somebody's going to, I don't want to say Timbuktu, but like somewhere far, Australia? What happens normally? Because I mean, I find it's amazing that this is the first time we're discussing this issue, that there are roaming charges and roaming data of overseas trips. People go Nigeria, people go Australia, people go Kenya, people all over the world. So nobody ever sat down and said, hey, what happens when we leave here?
I think this is the first time we've had an issue with the Bahamas, which is a peculiar arrangement in terms of CARICOM.
Right, so you tell telling me that when we hear that the Prime Minister is going to Nigeria, that those are the kind of phone bills that we get normally.
Is that a wrong?
That's what I wanted. That's what I want to find out.
What the Minister of Public Administration and Communication is trying to say is that the roaming charges in the Bahamas are way more than anybody else. It seems they're 10 times more than other countries.
But you traveled the other day. You went on a road show. Did you come back with a phone bill like that? I mean, I want to find out if this is what happened.
I didn't travel to the Bahamas.
The Bahamas is the highest
No, I just want to
worldwide
have a
because he said in
sense
the
of
Caribbean.
No, but I've looked at it myself. It's about 10 times. I'm not joking. I was shocked when I looked at the cost per megabyte in the Bahamas. It looks like 10 times any other country in the world, whether in France, whether in Czechoslovakia, whether in Australia. It just appears to be. I actually did a little research myself, and I discovered a lot of commentary, which you would discover yourself, Mr. Georges, if you did a little Googling, a lot of commentary on people who have visited the Bahamas and been faced with a huge bill and shocked out of their wits at the bill because it's so extreme compared to any other country in the world. This is what I discovered myself with just a little research. So the roaming charges in the Bahamas do appear to be 10 times more than other comparable countries. It just appears to be so. Check it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it.
You were talking about...
No, hold on, I think.
Yeah,
Or you've given up on Minister Sinana?
No. I wanted to ask him some questions based on an article in today's Guardian, which suggested that the two fast ferries have no system of maintenance in place as we speak.
It's not correct to say there's no system of maintenance. Maybe we need to revisit the system of maintenance that is taking place right now. The board did put forward an option to the ministry, which we are evaluating at this moment, where maybe we need to bring in a technical team to look at the system of maintenance that has been taking place right now.
What is the system of maintenance in place for the two fast ferries as we speak?
Well, what we have in place is a night maintenance system. And again, what had happened within the last year or so, there was a whole reorganizing of the maintenance system. Clearly, this is not suiting the vessels, and they are revisiting that entire maintenance system. But it's not correct to say that there's no maintenance system in place.
You said that you're looking at a short-term option for the cargo vessel. Has another vessel been identified, and if so, which vessel?
Okay, the port have been looking at the options, and there have been about 7 options available to them. I think they have targeted down to about 2. I don't have the exact names for them, but they have not taken a firm decision as to which one they'll be going with as yet. I expect it to be within the next couple of days.
Passenger vessel to accommodate while the other one is gone.
Yes. Again, they have taken a decision to approach the cabinet for a 3rd vessel, because we expect these 2 vessels to go on dry dock. And basically, when you look at the amount of challenges we are having, we want to ensure that they go on dry dock and we address every aspect of the vessels. So yes, we will be bringing in a 3rd vessel to take up the slack. No, but we are working with brokers to secure that vessel at this time.
There was the Venezuelan vessel that was the preferred. You are saying that there are 2, but coming out of that article, it kind of gave a clear-cut indication that we're going with a vehicle that is sitting in Venezuela ready to...
No decision on that.
There has been no decision made on that. I would suggest you do not get your information from the newspaper. Yes, I would suggest that. And I just want to deal with a point that Ms. Tate made. I used data from time to time when I went on the roadshow last year, and I did not incur a large bill in the United States. Okay? I can't tell you exactly how much data, how many megabytes of data that I personally use on official business while I was in the United States in July last year. But I can tell you that the roaming charges in the United States are far less than what I'm seeing when I do my preliminary research. The roaming charges in the US are much less than the roaming charges in the Bahamas. And it depends on the agreements between our local provider, between TSTT, and their counterpart in this particular country. In the United States, I recall, I think we use AT&T when I log on to a provider in the United States using my official phone. I see AT&T coming up, but it depends on what part of the country I'm in. There may be some other provider if I'm in the West Coast or the East Coast, as the case may be. But the roaming charges, from my memory, for my trip per unit, per megabyte, were much, much, much less than what I am seeing here in terms of the charge per unit. And the other thing I'd like to say, Minister Kojo has defended herself, and I think she's quite capable of defending herself. And any question that deals with personal judgment, it is not appropriate to ask any of us on this table anything about personal judgment. What I would say as a member of the government, that if official telephone is used for official business and it is not used for personal or frivolous reasons, then I don't see how the question arises about, irresponsibility or anything like that. And I wouldn't want to promote that or even suggest that, and I don't think you should. I think you should look at the facts. What are the charges for roaming in the Bahamas, and whether the data that was used is excessive or not, as the case may be. I'm not an expert, but I have seen that the roaming charges per unit in the Bahamas are much, much higher than many other countries in the world. And as I said, these are really questions that you should pose. We have a general responsibility as members of the cabinet to address misinformation. But I can tell you the roaming charges in the Bahamas, from what I'm seeing, are much, much higher per unit. But with respect to the actual usage of the phone, these are questions you should pose directly to the Minister of Tourism.
How is this now being discovered? Hasn't any other ministers traveled to the Bahamas before on roaming? On official business. How is this now being discovered? And given the current, given the information that is now going out there, would there be protocols in place when traveling to the Bahamas to prevent a recurrence of something like this?
I think this incident has crystallized everybody's views and the focus on the fact that the roaming charges in the Bahamas are extreme. I'm not aware of any other minister that went to the Bahamas in this current administration. I don't know. My memory tells me that that is the only official travel of any member of this administration to the Bahamas was by the Minister of Tourism. I don't think any other minister, I stand corrected, but I can't remember any of us going to the Bahamas.
But I should add, the roaming charges are an issue across the region, and that's why CARICOM has been addressing this at every meeting. And by July, we should have a better idea of how we go forward with it.
The Bahamas isn't in this meeting, so that's why I asked about would there be protocols going forward to curtail or perhaps put something in place to prevent a recurrence, because I think one of the ministers mentioned that the Bahamas would not be.
No, the meeting is to decide how we arrive at arrangements for a single ICT space, including roaming charges, legal arrangement around telecom companies. Within CARICOM, among...
Bahamas is a member of CARICOM.
Yes, but they won't be a party to this because they haven't signed on to the CSME, which governs economic arrangements within CARICOM.
Minister, two things. One is the terrible traffic. It seems as if, though, there is a lack of traffic management, because although you and I spoke about this, and you had indicated cars is part of the issue. Yesterday there was no traffic, and the day before there was a colossal traffic. So something is wrong with our traffic management, including looking at schools where they are located, and the attitude of parents picking up their children.
Mr. Amar, could you crystallize that into a question, please?
We need to put more up. Are we going to see better traffic management coming through your ministry?
The answer for that is yes. And I'll tell you why. The IDB was here just a couple days ago, and we have asked them to assist us with a proper traffic management study. The traffic problem in this country is a lot more than just cars. A lot of it have to do with planning. And you see commercial activities now taking place in areas with no parking. What that does is that customers go into these places, park on the road, and that adds to the traffic. 2 days ago, there was a massive pileup all the way down to Rising Road. This was because of an accident somewhere past Shogunas. So simple distractions on the road is what have the traffic pile up. So there are a lot of factors that we have to take into consideration, but yes, the ministry definitely is looking at this problem because it's a real problem.
Can we have one final question, please, Mr. Wilson?
I wanted to ask the Minister of Finance about some statements he made with regard to CARICOM Financial last week. The specific question is regards the $3.2 billion that you said was spent on fees and other such things over the 8 years after the collapse. Is that are the recipients of that money, that $3,200 million, are they going to remain silent, secret? Has that process been audited? Are you satisfied in your own mind that there was no hanky-panky under the previous administration that might have escalated the fees and other things charged by these various professionals?
The statement on the expenditure by the government on behalf of taxpayers and the exposure of the government that essentially become an exposure of taxpayers is based on auditing firm going through the records to determine what had been spent and what the government is exposed to. The types of expenses were grouped into various heads. I am not of the view that $3.2 billion would pay to anybody. That is just a category that included contingent liabilities and possible exposure. What we said was approximately $20 billion had been spent directly, and then the other $7 billion is contingent liabilities. Because, for example, in the takeover of Caribbean money market brokers by FCB, there were a lot of liabilities contained within CMMB that FCB had to get indemnity for. So the government has had to produce an indemnity to FCB for any claims or liabilities arising out of FCB's takeover of CMMG. And then you have I think they call them investment note certificates, the INCs, where there are court judgments where a person said they deposited money, entities said they deposited money into CLICO or CLICO Investment Bank, and when they went to get the funds were not there, so they have taken, various of these companies to court. Some have judgment, some don't have judgment, some are still pending a decision and that sort of thing. So the $27 billion is an accumulation of everything. The money directly expended, court judgments that are pending, potential liabilities that may come out of British American, may come out of colonial life up in the Caribbean and that sort of thing. So it's a complete tally. With respect to that $3.2 billion, I can easily get better and further particulars on exactly how that $3.2 billion is built up, but I do not believe that it's $3.2 billion that has been paid out to people for fees and that sort of thing. Okay? So I'll bring clarity to that, because I saw that is being raised as an issue in the newspapers, that people are asking, what is that for? But it's all in the audit report that we have received from the auditing firm that has been going through all of the expenditure by the government with respect to CL Financial, the bailout. Okay?
Okay, thank you all very much.